Hey, welcome, everybody. Appreciate you all being here in attendance. Appreciate our panelists being here. My name is Jason Johnson, and I'm very excited for today's webinar where we get to highlight um, some incredible work that's happening here in out of Kentucky. So before we get into the subject and introducing our panelists, let me just give you a couple of notes on the webinar today. We will go for about an hour. Today is the plan, and we'll have a live chat during the hour. So if you have questions or comments, you can throw them in the chat. One thing that's helpful with the chat, so we're on a webinar link, which means myself and the three panelists, we're the only ones that have a live camera and a live microphone. The rest of you in attendance, we can't see you and we can't hear you. So the chat is the way to let us know that you're there if you have any questions or anything. One thing that's helpful, an adjustment you can make is in the chat, if you'll adjust who you're sharing your comments with and make it so that everybody can see your comments, I think it's helpful. The way you do that is right above where you write a comment in the chat box, it says to, and then there's a little drop down arrow where you select who you're sharing your comment with. That should say to everyone. If that says anything other than to everyone, then not everybody's going to see your comment if it says to hosts and panelists or anything else. So adjust that so you're sharing comments with everyone, to everyone. And then after you've done that, go ahead. This is my go-to, but it's a good check-in. So even if I got this from you last week when you were on, I'm interested in how this week's going. Just type in an emoji that shares how this week's going so far for you. It's Thursday. We're near the end of the week, so we passed that middle point. For some people, that brings a little dread. For some people, they're super excited. Give us an emoji in the chat that tells us how this week's gone for you. The emojis never disappoint. All of your oh no, Mercedes, no, all of your emoji game is just incredible. Well, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of different emotions being represented in the chat, and so I'm hopeful that the discussion today will be will be a little bit of a pick me up. I always find myself buoyed up a little bit hearing from colleagues and learning about the good work that other people are doing. So appreciate you all showing up. So with that, let's introduce our topic and our panelists. Topic today, supporting student mental health, practical strategies and insights from New Vista. New Vista is a facility out of Kentucky that I have had the opportunity to work with several times over the last few years, and it has just impressed me every time. And we started talking about this a year ago, and I said we gotta work this out. I wanna tell your story a little bit because I think you have a pretty remarkable model. So let me introduce our panelists, and then we'll get right into the discussion. We are very grateful to have the following panelists from New Vista. We've got Randa Bush. Randa is the Regional Director of Children's Services at New Vista, over 14 years of experience working with children, adolescents, and families. Currently in leadership role, oversees the development and delivery of specialized children's services across the organization. Randa's passionate about eliminating barriers to mental health care and serving the underserved. Lives there in Kentucky with her family. Randa, welcome. So happy to have you. Next, we have Stephanie Carson. Stephanie serves as the clinical manager of school-based services at New Vista, 10 years of experience in the education system, 5 years in mental health. She focuses on bridging the gap between schools and mental health providers, currently pursuing her doctoral degree in traumatology. I'm glad that was included because I was going to mention it if it wasn't. Specializes in working with children who have experienced trauma, has facilitated more than 20 Y-Tri groups in partnership with school systems in her region, and helps students build resilience and practical skills. Stephanie, welcome. We're so happy to have you. And then last but not least, we have Rachel Fierstein, a licensed clinical social worker with 9 years of experience in community mental health at New Vista, helps build the agency's capacity to serve youth with co-occurring mental health and substance use challenges. Clinical work focuses on at-risk youth, including those in foster care or the court system, and has also successfully implemented the Y-Tri program across lots of diverse settings, equipping students and young people with tools to develop resilience. Rachel, very happy to have you on as well. So thank you all. These are three people I really respect and admire. I'm Jason Johnson. I'm the director of training for the Y-Tri organization. Prior to my role here at Y-Tri, I've done this for about 10 years. And prior to this, I worked as a school psychologist in the largest school district in my home state of Utah, where I was able to work there in elementary, middle, and high school settings. And then the last 10 years have been the director of training for Y-Tri, and it gives me the opportunity to go out and just meet incredible humans and work with them on helping bring skills and tools of resilience to their clients and students. So that was kind of how it started for me. As I mentioned, I started doing some training with this group in New Vista, headquartered in Lexington, Kentucky. And every time I went back out, just continually impressed at the model. And so I'm excited to be able to have other people learn from this model as well. So thank you, friends, for being on. Let's just get into it. I want to start off, and I think I'll kind of let you direct traffic, Randa, on who you want to respond to what. But let's just start off. For those not familiar with New Vista, just give us like a very brief history of the organization, what you do to work with schools specifically, because it's a pretty broad selection of services, and then maybe tell us a little bit about the mission of it and how that mission guides how you partner with schools.
Sure. So, like Jason said, we're New Vista. We are the Community Mental Health Center for the Lexington, Central Kentucky region here in Kentucky. That means there are 17 counties that we serve, and we serve a wide range of individuals from birth all the way through the lifespan. We provide mental health services, behavioral health services, substance use services, and services to those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, along with crisis services as well. New Vista's been around for 60 years, so we're celebrating our 60th year this year. And we, in the past 5 years, have become a certified behavioral health center, CCBHC, Community Behavioral Health Clinic. The mission of New Vista is we want to assist individuals and families, try to help enhance their lives through emotional, mental health, and physical well-being. And then we do that by providing these services. And our goal is to serve those who have limited options for meeting their behavioral health needs. With our school-based service line, we're all about eliminating barriers to access. So we know that most of the kids who have this need for our services have challenges getting to a clinic. So we take the clinic to them, we take our services to them, and partner with schools to meet the need in that setting.
It's awesome. Just as a brief follow-up, how do kiddos within the schools that you serve get connected with your services? What does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so coming out of COVID back in 2021, we developed the school liaison role, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But the school liaison is really the one that bridges the gap between the schools and our services. Out of that role, we also developed an online referral form so that it's specific to schools, that they can refer directly to us. Those referrals go directly to the school liaison so that they can oversee that referral came in and watch that referral move through our system and ensure that our those families get reached and scheduled, and those services are established, and then they close that loop going back to the school.
Nice. It's such an impressive model. Like I said, it's kind of wowed me every time I've been out there. I'm wondering if you could talk because I get the kind of the real macro view. I go out and spend a few days in an area and learn about kind of the specific challenges. But I there's been real themes I feel like have been emerging, at least to me, as I go throughout the country and talk to the mental health professionals there. It feels like there's some themes in mental health challenges that are fairly consistent. I'm wondering if you could just share a little bit about like what are the most common things you're seeing amongst students right now? Like, what are students most commonly being referred to your services for along the lines of mental health, mental wellness challenges? Just talk a little bit about the current trends you're seeing.
Yeah, some of the trends that we're seeing amongst the youth that we see is we're seeing a lot of anxiety. I definitely think following the pandemic, anxiety was already on the rise among youth, and then once COVID happened, and many schools shut down, and then when youth were having to go back into their educational settings, we have been seeing that anxiety has been skyrocketing. Alongside that, we see a lot of just motivation concerns out of students that students may struggle with their motivation to they may be struggling with their motivation to even go to school, to show up, to actually do their best, and sometimes even just a lot of apathy as well. That we may see students just feel just very apathetic, to just anything really. Other trends that we see a lot of youth who have been impacted by negative life events or trauma. And we also serve quite a few youth who are affected by substance use or at risk of substance use.
Thank you. I'm really thoughtful answers, and I'm glad you included motivation and apathy in there because I do think it's useful to view that through like a mental wellness lens. And I don't think it always gets viewed that way. I think a lot of times it's just viewed as this thing you got to fix your motivation. There's a lack of motivation. We just got to fix that. But I think a lot of times the lack of motivation, like the way we describe that is apathy. And I think a lot of times apathy is kind of a defense mechanism to not not handling something in a healthy way that's going on internally. These things we're feeling. And so the apathy becomes a defense mechanism to avoid feeling. And it results in this appearance of lack of motivation, but it's really, really hard to address. And that's probably one of the most common things I'm hearing coast to coast as I work with groups on that. So great insight. And I know you also beyond the trends of referral, Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you also are doing like kind of in the moment response to grief or crisis as well, which kind of exists outside of the mental wellness trends that you're seeing, but that also is kind of grouped into common services you provide as well, correct?
Yes, New Vista, we have a mobile crisis team, and they provide, immediate and short-term crisis intervention services. We commonly use that if a youth is just struggling, maybe they are at risk of being hospitalized, but we feel like we could just add some support to keep them from that, or or if they're coming just from a higher level of care and they need some additional clinical support to stabilize. They additionally do some mobile evaluations. If a youth is having a crisis at the school can contact our mobile crisis team and they can have, an evaluation right there. But we've also gotten really creative in how we respond to our community needs. One of those that has come up recently is grief. One of our other school liaisons, Tabitha Walters, she has just responded in an amazing way to our community. One of our counties that we serve has had several really unfortunate student deaths, and that has prompted us to try to figure out how we respond to the community. And Tabitha has put together these grief boxes, and they are just, incredible. She has boxes for classrooms, resources for teachers, individual students who may be impacted. And then she has worked with me just tirelessly at some points to be able to even coordinate if we need to have therapists on site at a school to assist. Randa, Stephanie, I don't know if any of you all have any other things to share about how we've been responding to our community needs, but those are some of the ones that come to mind for me.
Yeah, I was just going to add all of the things when we talked about the school liaison.
Yeah, it's probably a perfect lead in to where I want to go next. And by the way, huge shout out to Tabitha. I've met Tabitha. Again, part of your, I think, New Vista's strength is you have like absolutely assembled an Avengers like team up of just superstars, and they're fun, great personalities, but they're doing the real work. Somebody's already asked, so maybe if it comes up during the next part, what is in the grief box? I know that's already creating intrigue in some people, but it's a super cool thing. I saw Tabitha on here. Glad she's getting credit for the work she's doing with that. But let's do a lead in into the discussion now along the lines of how you connect your services as an organization with the needs of schools, because you're this kind of community support program that provides a lot of big services, but you have this direct lane into schools in part because of the school liaison. So maybe describe what that, how that works from a practical standpoint, like what's the role of the school liaison, and then how are you connecting services, and if now's the time to do it, maybe even expand a little bit out on some of the ideas along like the grief box, et cetera.
Okay, yeah, because I can, talk about the things that we do for a long time. But yeah, so the school liaison position was created out of that need, like Randa said, to bridge that gap between the education system and mental health. We just saw so many kids struggling who did not have access or felt like they did not have access to any support in that area. And, guidance counselors were just becoming buried and struggling as well. Teachers, how to respond to, just even classroom behavior, things like that. And so the liaisons were created, like Randa said, we cover a hub, which is a certain counties in Kentucky. So I covered 4 counties and, have all of those schools. And so we go around, we introduce ourselves, we do presentations on all of the services that we can offer for them, for their students, for their families. We work really close with the guidance counselors and the family resource staff, to do those things. We send out a needs assessment at the beginning of the school year to kind of see, from one district to another, what is the biggest trend that they're seeing, like you brought up, right? Like, what is that? What are those biggest trends that we're seeing? And then if we do not already have resources available for that need, our team is amazing at creating those, just like Tabitha did with the grief boxes. Or, if we have an issue, well, a couple of years ago, we know we did grief groups in one county because they had a number of students who had lost a loved one in the past year or two, right? And so we worked with their family resource center closely to create a program to work through grief, but then also, they had their part with pizza and, making pottery and things. But so yeah, just working to identify that need, making sure they know who we are all the time. And, we try to go to everything that we're asked to come to in the community, whether that's back to school events, health fairs, career fairs. We go to, ARCs of our students. For our special ed students, if they have ARCs, if we're invited, we will go to those, just so we can continue to build that relationship with the school and the family. What else? We lead summer school programs. So if, we're asked to, we have gone in and done, a Y try lesson every day for 2 weeks within a summer school program, or just create individual presentations. So like this past year, there was a particular middle school who had anxiety issues with upcoming state testing, right? And so Rada and I created a presentation on anxiety that was relatable to those students. And I went in one day and shifts, ran them all through it, right? And so being able to see them connect those dots and be like, oh, okay, I can have control over this thing, I think makes a big impact on them. It gives them hope, which, when we talk about apathy, and sometimes I think that, the root of apathy can be hopelessness. And so being able to do what we can, and a lot of that comes back to helping build resiliency, such as introducing the why try lessons, correct? But we also have seeking safety that, for substance use and trauma, we've done lots of trauma work. If a tornado impacts one of our school districts, we can let our mobile crisis team know, and they will go in and, talk to the schools. They will walk around to the houses of those affected, just to see if they can help. We had, unfortunately, I don't want to say a rash, but, 3 suicides completed at a school a couple of years ago. And so they had, a forum there, and we brought our crisis team so they could discuss it. And then when the students broke up, they could come and talk about those things with us. So, those are just a million examples of how we do it, but it's just a lot of it is building that relationship, knowing what we have to offer, and then making sure they're aware of it, like case management. I hope for our first episode, psychosis. Even things that might seem smaller to us. So like, we have a drop-in center at our local clinic where, someone who is, might be homeless or whatever, they can go in, they can get clean clothes, they can take a shower, they can get snacks and things like that. And so, I sent that flyer around to the local high school in case they had any high school students, who were sleeping on their friend's couch or sleeping in a car, just anything that we can do to try to make an impact on those kids now to give them hope for the future.
Incredible. So I have lots of thoughts and follow-up questions. Let me try to, first of all, a few people asked about the grief box, and Tabitha, who got credit, is on here and was kind enough to include in the chat. I'm just going to read Tabitha's comment here in case you didn't see it. I include at least one age-appropriate book, various fidgets. By the way, New Vista has the best fidgets. They're awesome. That fulfill a range of sensory needs. Journals, 988 materials, psychoeducational materials for both parents and the children. And then depending on the crisis, we will personalize them for the situation. So I'm guessing you have them built and then you personalize them after a crisis happens to the individual and the person receiving them. Awesome. A question did come up, and you don't have to answer it immediately, but you can be thinking about it. Somebody asked about the family liaison. Do Title I schools get a family liaison, or is that a district decision? Who gets those liaisons? The other follow-up question I wanted to ask, because this is part of what's impressed me. I feel like in a lot of cases, for those of us that work, like I was on trauma teams, trauma response teams in the district that I was in, and it feels like it's so hard to switch from a reactive model to a model that allows us to get out ahead of things. And Stephanie just very naturally described the services, and it was like, we're doing crisis response, but we're also like getting up the pulse of what's happening, so that like the thought of a mental health team coming in and doing anxiety reduction workshops prior to state testing, it's genius. But that, like, it's tough to get to that point, and maybe it just feels natural for you, but I think it's a little bit unusual. A lot of people struggle getting to that point. Do you have any tips on getting to a place where you can be a little more ahead of things rather than just strictly existing in a reactive model? That's the big question, but I'll throw that out to all of you. And then also, if any of you have any insight on how that works with the liaison, is that strictly a district decision, or do you have any influence on that?
Well, I thought of something that happened a couple of years ago, but One of our schools invited Stephanie in to go through some mindfulness exercises with their staff. And I think it starts by supporting their staff in the building because, we are not always there, but if we can equip them with what they need to feel calm in their own body and ready. There have been several opportunities where we've been able to partner with schools and their staff to give them support. We had an app called My Strength for a while that you could use on your phone and kind of go through your own exercises. And we had some schools who were implementing the use of that app in their staffing so that they could walk through some of those guided exercises together as a staff. So I think just creating that environment where everyone feels supported before the crisis comes, because it's going to come. Those days are going to come with the kids too. And we also just kind of keep an awareness of the calendar year. There are obviously certain times in the year that we know that are particularly more challenging for our kids, coming out of breaks, coming back from holidays, just different things. So we try to be ready and able to offer those additional supports to schools during that time. And then schools often will ask or invite us in to do professional development around topics that they're seeing that are particularly challenging for their schools. And we've been able to either develop a professional training, or we have one already created that we can bring related to that content.
It's awesome. It's really, really smart and I think really effective from what I've seen. Um, let's speak maybe a little bit to the people that don't have the luxury of having a new Vista on hand, because not, I'm sure some people are hearing this and going, I really wish I had a new Vista on hand that I could connect with, but I don't, at least not that I'm aware of. Do you have any tips for educators that may not have access to the community services that you have there? Advice would you give as far as trying to help collaborate with local mental health support or community partners?
Sure. So what I have seen that has been successful, I think, for some of the schools that we partner with, like we have one local high school that invites the community, mental health partners in at the beginning of the school year, and they do like a meet and greet, so they kind of get to know who's there and available for support. Obviously we like to form, MOAs or kind of partnerships with our schools that ensure, like, when we come, that there's confidential space provided and things so that we can serve their students. So those just formal partnerships with who is locally available to you, I think, is really helpful in knowing what they can offer and what unique services that they have. Um, I think the other thing is whatever you can do to eliminate access barriers for families. Like we have found, like if we can have our intake packets on site at school, if that parent's there and they say yes, you can give it to them to start filling out, just to kind of get the ball rolling, to kind of help facilitate that warm handoff. Sometimes families are hard to reach if they don't identify or recognize a phone number. But if we're calling from the school in partnership with that school and they've agreed and they are interested in the service, then we facilitate that warm handoff there. So there's just been a variety of ways that we have found to partner with schools that have worked, that I think would work for any agency in your area. But it does take forming that strong collaboration and having that open line of communication between the two parties. And I don't know if Rachel or Stephanie, you want to add to that?
No, that's really helpful. We did have a question come in. My friend Tim, who I shouted out earlier, who's on here. It's not my place to say, but Tim has been doing this for a long time. Tim has literal decades of experience, and he's still at an age where a lot of people have retired. Tim is still actively supporting the unhoused in the Cincinnati area. He asked if you know just offhand roughly what percentage of your students are unhoused in the areas you cover support for. Tim, I didn't want to say, but he just says 81. Tim's incredible.
I don't have like a hard percentage number, but I will say, like, where we see like those trends and those needs arise, we respond to try to meet those needs. So I can remember back a couple of years ago, one of our counties in particular, their family resource center was identifying a lot of transient youth in their community and reached out, and we created bags, basically care bags that they could distribute out through their family resource center that had hygiene items and a few like mental health things that they could pass out. But that's because they were seeing a higher volume in that county at that time. So we definitely kind of keep our ear to the ground and are listening to see where those needs are and trying to be responsive to meet the need. I would say areas like Lexington, our central Kentucky area, probably have a higher population, but we do serve very rural communities too and small towns, so that those numbers could fluctuate and vary by location.
Thank you. And then can I ask just a follow-up logistical question? Because we've now heard about grief boxes and bags for the unhoused. Like this is the stuff that for a lot of people like stresses them out. Like what is the I think I know what the answer is going to be, but I want to hear you say it. What is the process? How do you go about like it's not light work making a whole bunch of bags or boxes to have on hand with resources in them. How do you go about logistically doing that?
Well, I can think back to like the bags for those who are experiencing homelessness. We actually had a team that was partnering in those efforts with us. It was through our local resource coordinator. And at that team meeting, we would have the health department, a school representative, DCBS representative. So that was really a community effort. Our local resource coordinator kind of collected all the items and everyone contributed. We had some donate and sponsorships and different things like that, but it really was a group effort of bringing in those items together. And then our prevention department pitched in and gave some time and labor to help put those all in. So it's kind of all hands on deck just to meet the need wherever we can and however creatively we can.
And I'm thinking that would be a great project or activity that could potentially help bridge gaps and make connections as well with if that activity was connecting in school support with community support as well, because there's often a lot of pretty willing and helping hands from those areas. So awesome, thank you. And Tim just shouted out his organization Upspring in Cincinnati. Check that out. He's doing great work there. Hey, let's talk a little bit now. I know another thing that comes up for me around from educators. So I spent a lot of time in schools supporting really all types of educators get trained on our model for resilience. But one of the things that comes up a lot when we're talking about challenges is crisis support. What do and I feel like I want to take advantage a little bit of having some real experts on here right now, because this is a thing that I think is pretty stressful for a lot of educators. Like we hope crises don't happen, but they're somewhat inevitable. And so I'm curious if you could offer any tips for best practices for educators to keep in mind for how to respond like in the moment of crisis, when a crisis happens, before that support team is able to arrive and come in and offer support. And this could be anything from like de-escalation tips with an individual in crisis or a crisis team, or something that would require like a whole crisis team. What could you pass on as a team of experts on that? Because I know you've done quite a bit in this area.
I think one of the biggest things that you can do is before you engage with that student or that situation, take a second, take a deep breath, check in with yourself. Be aware of how you might be wanting to respond to that situation, because crises, they can be really intense. They can activate us. So taking that second just to, if you can, to compose yourself before you respond or just react to a student. I also think, other best practices is to, respond to the behavior. react to the behavior and not label the student. So if you're able to if you're able to, depending on the situation, right? Because crises, they all exist in their own context, and how you respond to one may be completely different than another. But if you're able to handle a situation and not inflame it, so if you're able to separate a student, if you're able to just sometimes even just by saying, hey, you seem really upset right now, offering that empathy and just observing their behavior and inviting them into a conversation. I have used a lot of choices, or I've offered, instructed educators to use choices. If you've got a really little guy and they're screaming and they're kicking and they're rolling around your classroom, let's offer some choices, be directive in how you want to approach that. I had to do that once in a school setting where I walked in right in the middle. I was called in, to a crisis for a little guy. And I offered, I said, hey, you look really mad. And he responded with a string of not okay words. And, but I ended up, offering some choices. I'm like, and I offered an unideal and an ideal choice. I was like, you can take some deep breaths to calm down, or we can play some Uno. And he, again, reacted really strongly to me. I offered those choices. I was persistent with it. Like, these are the choices that you have. And eventually he screamed at me that he wanted to play Uno. And I went and got it. I said, okay, we can do that. But while I go to get my cards, I need you to practice some deep breaths, because we can't play if you're not going to be unsafe. And so, really, I think at that moment, most of the time we want to try to fix the situation right then and there. We want to have a conversation with that student about why they're acting the way they're acting. But if you're waiting for help to arrive, the goal is just to de-escalate and ensure safety. So if you have to, offer those choices, if you have to engage them in a game, if you have to take your student on the walk if it's safe to do so, just to get them to have just a moment of re-regulation, to be able to to diffuse a situation, then I think it's definitely, some things that we could do.
Nice. What was that? Randa or Stephanie, anything you would add to that?
Think, I don't want to say a lightheartedness, but using humor, using playfulness, using the we're gonna get through this. I think sometimes, or oftentimes, our kids read from us whether they're too much to handle, or whether we feel confident in engaging with them in that crisis. And so, just even if you are rattled on the inside, maintaining that composure on the outside. And I have often just found that playful engagement can really switch them. It can flip the switch so fast, because they're almost like, okay, what's happening here? It's like a little, and then you can just kind of see them shifting over to a different mindset. And then you're able to get some really quick connection, even on a small level, to potentially get some cooperation for safety for all, and then move through that to the next thing. Like Rachel said, it's maybe not the time to talk about all the reasons why that they had that emotional outburst or those behaviors. You can definitely revisit that potentially later when they're more regulated. But really right there is, like she said, diffusion. And I have found things like playfulness and humor, and not treating it like it's a really serious and severe situation, because they read that off of you, and then it almost always escalates to more than that.
And I would piggyback off of what Rachel said too, about taking that moment to gather ourselves, because, there's a saying that a dysregulated adult cannot regulate a dysregulated child. And so, if we do not take the time to calm ourselves down, or, hone our focus in on what the goal is with helping this kiddo, then we're not going to be able to go in there and de-escalate. I mean, because we know that in that moment, they might appear aggressive and all these things, but on the inside, they probably feel completely out of control. right? And so by having a calm adult come in and, do the things like Randa said, laugh or make, play games or do any of those things, we're helping them calm down on the inside, which helps them regain control. But we can't do that if we're in 50 directions ourselves.
I think that's really, really useful, really wise. I know for me, in those de-escalation moments, the humor or the playfulness, obviously at appropriate levels, it would help me like not take it personal as much because those once I if I felt myself taking something too personal, then I felt like it took me out of the position to like objectively offer the best or the best practices of support. And then the other thing I don't know if this was just like a personal thing that worked for me. So I don't even know if it's helpful for anybody else, but I found it useful to almost be verbalizing out loud, like what I was doing and like what all the instructions were. I found that it helped kind of moderate my emotion and it helped almost keep a script that I could follow and kind of avoid distraction. So it's like we're going to go walk together over to this point of the classroom right now. So we're just walking over right now. And it was almost like I was talking myself into an emotionally stable space as much as I was the student. But as I did that or do that, that was helpful for me also. So, but those are real. Those are the tough situations. They're the ones I get asked about all the time from educators. So thank you for sharing some insight. Let's circle back to some of the themes we talked about at the beginning. Anxiety is a big one. I'm trying to remember what were some of the other ones you had mentioned. Motivation is a big one. Apathy, and then also you're dealing with a lot of substance prevention, but also I'm helping students that have used that you're trying to get to not use again in the future. So I'm wondering if you could just kind of treat myself and the attendees today, kind of like we're educators that you've been called in to support. What are some practical pieces of advice that you would offer along those themes, those trends that you're seeing, for educators to be better equipped to be supportive along those lines of trends that you're talking about and supporting a lot right now?
Well, go ahead, Stephanie.
I was just going to say that I think a lot of times it's how we approach kids in general. A lot of, unfortunately, the squeaky wheel will get the oil, right? So it's the most disruptive kids that might get a lot of attention. However, there could be other students who internalize those behaviors, right? And so, or internalize those feelings. And so we can't catch those as easy. And so I feel like approaching, all the situations or the school year or whatever, right? We talk about trauma-informed care, trauma-informed approaches and all those things, asking ourselves, instead of saying, what is wrong with you? What has happened to you, right? We know that those behaviors are coming from somewhere. But if we just assume or write them off as a bad kid, right, we're not going to get to the core of the issue that is, what can help them in the future. That's a big thing, I think, is just approaching with that frame of mind, period. Because then, you come into it being empathetic and compassionate instead of, maybe judgmental or aggressive yourself. That's a big one. I think even just like wording and, I don't know if the other ones agree with me on this, but, I find it's very helpful to say that's understandable instead of I understand, especially with teenagers, because the world that they live in now is so different than ours that we can't understand what cyberbullying is like or, these different issues. However, I can, it's understandable and I can relate to those feelings of being ostracized or being, not included or lonely or, things like that. So helping them to see that too. that we're not saying, oh, I understand what you're going through. This is what you need to do. I think that, a lot of times they get that from the other adults in their lives. And so by just saying, that's understandable. It's really understandable that you're upset because this happened. I don't know how I would react in that situation, right? However, I know what it's like to feel these things. And so just approaching it, that kind of on the small level. On the larger level would be, being aware. Sorry, that threw me off. Being aware of the community resources, right? So that's a big one. Like why we have grown so much is because there is such a need out there for that connection between the schools, the mental health community resources for all of us to come together, because we all have so many different pieces of the puzzle that if we can connect those, right, I mean, then we can be of even greater assistance to our kids. One story I love to share is I had a student, a high school student, and I was working with them during the summer. It was July. It was getting ready to be August, and I found that they had no air conditioning. So I'm scrambling. I'm like thinking, when they have younger siblings in the house. So I'm thinking, what can I do to alleviate some of the stress or this pressure on this family so that they can continue to do what they need to do? I happened to call that student's school to talk to the family resource person for another reason. And they asked me, hey, have you heard from that student this summer? How are they doing? I was like, well, guess what? I just found out they have no air conditioning. And the family resource person said, well, guess what? We just had 2 window units donated to the school. I will take them out there and install them myself. And so, just even interactions like that can lead to these, amazing resources for these kids and their families, and then obviously that extends into the school family as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Rachel, I think you had something as well.
I think Stephanie said it so well. And I think just to piggyback off of what she was saying, I think for a lot of the youth that I work with, they've been through some really complex things. They've had a lot of negative adult interactions. And so we have to show that we're different. We have to show that when a problem comes up, if they're struggling, especially in the realm of youth who are using substances, more often than not, at least in Kentucky, substance use, when kids are caught vaping or smoking at school, it's a very punitive approach. They may get charges, they may get a lecture, they may, just hear all of these messages from adults that they're just bad kids, And so I think for people who are really invested in seeing a student do well, especially when there are problem behaviors, is to really try to, really try to show that you're different. And that starts with understanding. Kids do well when they can. People do well when they can. And if the student is not doing well, then, let's explore that. Let's try to really figure out what's going on for that student, and then connect with resources, just like Stephanie said. It's so valuable when, and kids start to change when they start to feel like there are adults that really care about them and that really want them to do well, that are really invested in their lives. So just simple things like just non-judgmental understanding, or showing that, you're trying to get it. And really trying to just show up for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll just add one thing, and it is a little plug for Y Tribe, because we have talked about this, but a lot of those metaphors and concepts are so relatable that whether they're using them in group content or individual, they circle back to them a lot. And I know Stephanie has told me, like, the labels one has been so applicable with so many kids, and like just talking about what labels do you have that are on you, or have you feel like have been put on you that you don't want there, like in giving them more agency and control. A lot of them are looking at their lives and they're saying, I don't have control of anything. So that apathy sets in, right? That why should I care? Because caring gives you hope, and then you're set up for disappointment, right? So, but like when you can give them that agency to say you have things within your control, it does empower them, and it puts them back on a path of motivation, and they risk the idea of hoping again, because they've spoken with someone who has given them that hope to see a different future.
So good. For those that may not be familiar with the Y Try material, our resources help teach the skills of resilience, and so we've broken resilience down to like 10 skills of resilience. We know there are more than that, but specifically the one Randa referred to is this focusing on positive self-image and trying to help empower individuals to tear off negative labels that they may have and recognize goodness and strengths that exist inside of them, and then figure out how to share those to the world through our behavior, our action, and our interactions with others. So really, really cool. And the ideas you've shared are spot on. I'm so happy that other people get to see what I've been bragging about for the last few years. Just a powerhouse. By the way, there you have. I'll set up an email making connections. But there you've got an ask about potentially having some friends, school counselors from Cincinnati come and shadow and engage with you. So I'll set up an email and we'll explore opportunities. But that's awesome. I was going to, so a couple of you have asked about the recording. Yes, this is being recorded. I believe we send out the link after it's uploaded to our YouTube channel. And so if you want to share this with others, you'll have it. Also, in just a little bit, I'm going to put up contact information. If any of you want to ask or speak directly to any of our panelists about any of the ideas that they shared or follow up on any of those things, they have generously allowed me to share their email addresses here shortly. Any other thoughts? Maybe I guess I do have one follow up on the Y try of it, and Randa already alluded to it a little bit, but I'm curious, what are some of the other connection points? Like, what are some of the specific skills or challenges that you found the Y try tools helpful with within your model? So sounds like you've used the tearing off labels one quite a bit. Any others that come to mind?
I also love the crab pot. Sorry, Rachel. We need to just raise our hands. I'm sorry.
You're all right.
Anyway, the crab pot. I love that one because, a lot of times I think, especially transitioning from middle school to high school, a lot of kids become aware of, yeah, I've had this friend my whole life, but they might not be the best influence, or they might not want the best for me. And so, using that lesson to help them identify, like, what is a true friend? That's someone that wants us to grow and to do better. That can be an eye-opening thing for them, transitioning, well, anytime, but it seems like specifically from middle school to high school, right? And so, and helping them to realize that outgrowing some of those, negative influences is a good thing. Go ahead, Rachel. Sorry.
That's okay. I use the jumping hurdles, which is about problem solving. I use that one frequently. I would say that, one of the ones that I use the most is the reality ride. I use that a lot with my, any little ones that I may meet with that struggle with some impulsive decision making. We take that opportunity to really talk through just, that their decisions and, why it's important to make good decisions. But, if they have to kind of curb their impulses to make a better choice, what could be the benefit of that? So I use those two skills frequently.
I love it. So the skills you've described are kind of our connection to others, for good or for bad, and then problem solving and decision making and recognizing decisions have consequences. Really critical skills of resilience.
And I would say the approaches that I have found to be really helpful I'm obviously not, I haven't been in practice for a few years, but even when I was doing the school-based work, myself, incorporating music has always been a great approach. And a lot of times they can give me a song that speaks to right where they are, or even can regulate them faster than maybe my words of trying to explore what the emotion is. So music has always been a strong suit of mine to utilize in session. And then that idea, it's more from the resiliency, I think, Jason, but that surrendering the one up, like just coming with that posture of giving them choices, get not coming in as this power figure over them, but surrendering that one up. And a lot of the times that's intriguing to them because they haven't experienced that dynamic with another adult.
I love that. That's a great teaser for future discussion. We'll save that for part two. We're getting New Vista part two. I'm already manifesting it. But an exploration into connection, how we connect, and how that dynamic can really impact and influence motivation is a key piece. Okay, so I have two final questions, and I'm going to put up contact information while we respond to the last question. But the first question is. Stephanie, on a personal note, how close are we? You're still on pace for the doctorate, right?
I am. I have 4 classes, and then I'll start my dissertation.
Yes,
And
I'm
I
so
did not put
excited
that
for
in
you.
my bio, by the way. That was Randa. Just saying.
I'm glad it was included because I was ready. I had made a note. I was going to mention it if it wasn't in there. So thank you, Randa, for reading my mind. Okay, last question. One of the things that has impressed me, and I believe, both Randa and Stephanie last time I was out there a couple months ago doing some training for your group. One of the things that has really impressed me is you have uniquely maintained a really hopeful and positive outlook in what is currently pretty difficult times in education. Like I run into a lot of educators that are experiencing a lot of discouragement, a lot of uncertainty, sometimes even fear around just how they feel within the field right now. And I feel like you have maintained a really remarkable amount of hope amongst pretty unprecedented and difficult times in education. So I'm curious if you could just share a little bit of just looking forward. What helps you stay hopeful and gives you hope about the work being done in schools? And if you have any advice for educators that want to continue to be part of the solution, feel free to share that as well. And I'm going to put up contact info while you're talking.
Okay.
Now you're all being polite. It's
Call on somebody. I think for me, it's the being able to see. Whoa, the screen changed. Sorry, that threw me for a second. Being able to see that growth, from day to day, it can be frustrating, but when you have, a kiddo in school that you're just from the beginning of the year till the end of the year, if you're consistent with your relationship with them, you will see that growth. And to me, that is the motivation that I hold on to every day. When I go in, or like when I have a new intake, right? Or I've had a kiddo that's been just not, for, I think I've told that story before. I had a kid who every question I asked him for the entire first year was, I don't give a SH, right? Every answer, I don't, whatever. And that's all he said. Well, after a year, he finally started opening up, and now he's a senior in high school, and he can look back and say, man, I was a really mad kid. Yes, you were. So being able to, for me to witness that journey, that's what gives me motivation, knowing that they will leave our relationship better off than when they came in.
awesome. Thank you.
I think it really is like the little things, right? That, the student that gives putting forth their best effort to try, the student who finds one supportive adult to connect with, the teacher who, gets resources and feels supported, in their classroom. I think it's a bunch of small shifts for me that give me hope, right? Small things that our teachers, our kids, community partners are all doing just to get back to what's important, which is supporting our kids.
Yeah, I think.
How about you, Randa?
Yeah, I think what gives me hope is like seeing all the people that are here, like the team around us, like to know we're not in it alone, that there are other people showing up and doing this work every day. And it's important work. To me, I'm very mission minded. So it's like it keeps me focused on the mission, which is believing that, we're changing generations of, one generation to another who have struggled with the various challenges or issues. And if you can break into that cycle and create a hopeful generation to come up behind, this one, and that they're trying to exercise resiliency and change, that's exciting to me. And to see the potential for the generations that follow, because they have access to resources and supports that maybe weren't there for the generation before. So for me, it's seeing that we're in it together, knowing that it's a struggle, but the mission is crucial and worth it.
That's awesome. I think for me, one of the I'm going to add my source of hope, and I think you all are living it, and I think that's part of why I enjoy going out and being with your group so much, and I'm excited to be able to share this with people throughout the country now. But there's real value in being able to find sources of really, really good, hopeful energy. And I can get a little cynical about things, and I'm not like a naturally over the top, like positive person. I feel like I'm reasonably positive, but I let my logic and my realistic approach kick in too much sometimes. And I think you all are such an example of just the power of its synergy, right? You combine good sources of positive energy, and the output is greater than any of the individual sources. And so I've been in schools where it felt like I was on an island. I didn't necessarily feel like I had good support, or I didn't feel like I had colleagues that I really, really clicked with. But I think we're at a place now, and the fact that people keep showing up for these is really remarkable to me. And it tells me we are figuring out ways to like seek out and connect and find those great systems of support. And I think what you have done there, you've assembled the right people, and they're mission driven, and they're just incredible humans that bring good energy to the table. I feel like every day and every exposure and experience I've had to your group has just reiterated that, and it always makes me feel better. So thank you for bringing that today. I'm hoping that it's been helpful to the people that have listened. I really think it has. Huge thank you to all our attendees, all of you that showed up and watched live. Awesome to have you on, and your comments and questions in the chat were phenomenal. Huge round of applause to our panelists representing New Vista. I've got contact info up there again. Thank you all for showing up. I've got another one of these in the hopper. It'll be next week or the week after, but I'm going to be working with the National Alternative Education Association, and we're going to be talking about trying to avoid burnout and trying to keep our own energy good in a climate that sometimes can be a little bit discouraging. And so I'm excited for that as well. I've got a couple powerhouse panelists to get back on. So huge thanks, everybody.